Our talk title for today is Rose-Colored Glasses. And as I said, I'm not picking these. They come from the organization because we're all combining in that consciousness. And our book this month, our monthly theme is Loving Kindness and Forgiveness. And the book is a wonderful book called The Art of Forgiveness, Loving Kindness and Peace by Jack Kornfield. We do have copies in the bookstore. And our quote for the day is from the statement of what we believe that was written by Ernest Holmes back in the 1920s when he was asked what he believed. He said, "We believe in the eternal goodness of life." We believe in the eternal goodness of life. We'll get back to that in a minute. But when we hear the statement, rose-colored glasses, what we usually, what comes to mind is the definition that I found in the Wiki dictionary. An optimistic perception of something, a positive opinion, seeing something in a positive way, often thinking of it as better than it actually is. Often thinking of it as better than it actually is. So that brings to mind the idea of what they call rosy reflection on the past, rosy retrospection. And rosy retrospection is looking back in the past and saying, oh, it was, so simple, and everything was great then. The food was pure, and the air was pure, and the, blah, 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 blah. It was so good back then. The people who lived then were fearful. They were just like us. They got involved in the complications of life as it is. It's always been a challenge to find the truth and find our center in the midst of whatever was going on. So, James Thurber, who was a wonderful writer, said, "Do not look back in anger or forward in fear, but around in awareness." Do not look back in anger or forward in fear, but around in awareness. So we're invited not to think of the past as rosy or terrible, just what it was. There it was. But we're more concerned with now, because what we do now determines our future. So how are we now? Well, part of this is that we have to invite ourselves to see a bigger picture. We can all get caught up in the anxieties and the media flares for the day. I don't care what day you pick. There's going to be something terrible happening in the world, and they're going to tell it to us over and over and over again. But we don't hear that much about what's going on that's good. And so we have to sort of step back and see the bigger picture. And I heard a story from Reverend Sue Ellen Miller. And she was talking about, on the second Sunday of every month, she goes to brunch with a bunch of people from her congregation. And they always go to the same restaurant. And so one Sunday, they all went to the same restaurant, and their table was taken by someone else. And so they had to wait for their, table to clear, for the space to be made for this group to come in. And so they were standing around sort of grousing about, we come here all the time, and why do we have to wait? Da, 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 da. So anyway, they got served. They finally got seated. They got served. And near the end of their meal, one of their members got ill. All of a sudden, he sort of made a little croaking sound, and his head jerked to the side and hit the table. They called 911. They got the emergency paramedics there, and they immediately worked on him and took him to the hospital. And they all said, "Oh my God, it is so good that we were late in coming to this meal, Because if we had come at our regular time and been seated, we would have been done, and he would have been in his car when this happened. So it's really, we look at it in the moment, we think, oh, this is terrible, and yet, what a blessing that he was surrounded by people who loved him and who knew he'd be alone when he went home and, who called the emergency and took care of him. So we can't always see in the moment what the good is. We just have to remember that it's there. And it may be something that's evolving out of a terrible situation. I mean, we cannot look at Nice and say, oh, there's good there. We can't say that yet. But I'm knowing that it is a change in consciousness that is going to shift something towards something better. I don't know what that is, but I trust that that's the way, the underlying invisible behind what we see, it is the way that it works. It ultimately brings forth something good. But it's hard to see in the moment, so we have to take that broader view, that bigger picture. Now, we, of course, are positive thinkers in this particular organization, in this particular philosophy. And we do think positive because we know that it is beneficial to us. It certainly is better, from my judgment, in my opinion, from sitting around awfulizing. Ain't it awful? Oh, ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? No. Awfulizing is really destructive, physically as well as mentally and emotionally. It is a way of bonding, but there are better ways of bonding. But I heard this wonderful story on This American Life yesterday. Of course, you know what station that was on. And it was about, during World War II, the Japanese, of course, overran China. And they came to this city called Shifu. And in the city, there was a school for British and American children of missionaries. And they overran the school, and they took the children and their teachers and put them in a concentration camp where they remained for the entire war. And so here's 150 children. Now, fortunately, the teachers, when they were leaving, grabbed pencils and paper and musical instruments and things that they thought the kids might need, including Girl Guide uniforms and merit badges and things. They hauled all this stuff with them. And so what they did was they made the leaders of the organization. So here's a bunch of kids, 150 kids, and they're marching into the concentration camp. And what are they singing? They're singing the 46th Psalm that says, God is my strength. And so I'm not afraid. And so they're singing this song, and it's getting embedded in them. And so they come into this concentration camp, and the older teachers are really not that much older than their students. They're like in their 20s. And they were called the Brown Owls. And the Brown Owls were the teachers. And the children, of course, all became guides. They had the girl guides and the boy guides. And so all the girls and boys were guides. That meant that they were given certain rules and certain things that they had to do. So they made it, so there's this little girl that they interviewed. Now she's 82 years old. But they interviewed her, and she was like, yes, there were guards and there were guns, and mostly I thought about merit badges. And And they kept the rules. I mean, they said, they had terrible food. The food that they gave them was the kind of food that they fed the animals. It was what they called broom corn. And it was a gruel. And they served it in a tin can or a soap dish or something. That's what they got their food in. And so they said, we were all told, it doesn't matter how disgusting the food is, we still want good table manners. It doesn't matter how hungry you are, you're not going to steal. You're going to do a good deed every day and help other people, because that's what the guides do. And so they made this little miniature world that allowed them to be more than their conditions. They had, and the girl guides actually began to influence the brown owls, the older people, because they were so unflinchingly cheerful. They were smiling because they were supposed to. And the whole atmosphere, he said they had this atmosphere because they had this promise that they wouldn't stop smiling, they wouldn't give up, they would carry on and sing songs, and they would insist on everybody washing. So Mary says, sometimes you're eating this glop that they're feeding you, and here comes Miss Stark up behind us, one of our teachers. Mary Taylor, do not slouch over your food while you're eating. Do not talk while you have food in your mouth. And there are not two sets of manners, one set of manners for the princesses in Buckingham Palace and another set of manners for the Wei Shen concentration camp. Okay. In winter, it was freezing. They provided no heat. They did have a pot-bellied stove, so the children would go out to where the guards were and get flakes of coal, and they would gather these flakes of coal, and they would put them in buckets, and they would pass the buckets down, and then they would mix the buckets with dirt and things like that, and then sit in water and dry them out in the sun, and then they would burn them in their stove. And so this woman, Mary Previtt, says, I won the competition for keeping my stove the hottest till it went red. We had the longest time of the red stove. I mean, that's what she's thinking about. I'm earning badges. I'm competing for who's got the hottest stove. I mean, she sort of thought it was fun to gather all that, all the coal dust. I mean, it kept them busy, and they were doing something productive, and they were helping because that's what they were there for. They were there to help. And, she says, here I am, 82 years old, and what do I choose to tell you? I won. The pot-bellied stove turned red more times, And she said, I can't tell you that this was fun. She says, you had guard dogs, electrified wires, barrier walls, pill boxes with armed guards in them. You weren't in a summer camp. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying this was Fun City. I'm telling you, we lived a miracle where grown-ups preserved our childhood. And every day they sang, day is done, gone the sun, from the hills, from the sea, from the sky, all is well, safely rest, God is nigh. And what that told them every day was, I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. Regardless of what was going on around them, I am safe. And they were saved in August of 1945. But as the reporter on this story said, it turns out in a place like that, being able to be cheerful, to have a positive outlook, it's not dopey or silly. It's how you survive. It's how you tell the story that matters. It's how you tell the story about the experience that you're having that matters. Last week I think I had that quote from Aldous Huxley, who said, it's not what happens, it's how you experience what happens. And we all experience what happens differently. Anybody who's watched an accident or something like that, you talk to 6 people about what they saw, they all saw something different. Because we're looking through whatever colored glasses we're wearing. I got the Lani colored glasses, we got the Julia colored glasses, we got the Pat colored glasses. We've all got our perceptions. And as William Blake said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to be as it is, infinite. Infinite. So we're all connected to something amazing and infinite, and we know that staying positive is beneficial. I saw that in the Mayo Clinic describes the benefits of positive thinking. Increased lifespan. People who go to church live an average of 8 years longer than people who don't. Lower rates of depression, lower levels of distress, greater resistance to the common cold, better psychological and physical well-being, reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease, thank you, Dave, and better coping skills during hardships and times of stress. Better coping skills, because we can remember, oh yeah, this too shall pass, whatever this is. And in spite of what looks like is going on, we're only hearing what the media is choosing to tell us. What's really happening, we get to decide from our interactions with one another and our interactions in consciousness with ourselves. We get to decide, we get to choose. So we're not denying what's going on, but we're looking for the good. I mean, think about when you fell in love with someone, and maybe it's your dog, your cat, your parakeet, but your child, or your beloved, but you fell in love. And the thing is, when you fall in love, don't you see the beloved, through rose-colored glasses? Don't you see the positive things about them? You ignore all the little things that will later drive you nuts. But, you see them as they are, really, as the beauty and love and creative beings that they are. And we tend to forget that, and we have to not forget. I didn't realize that Louis Armstrong wrote the song La Vie en Rose. He says, that song, you've heard it sung a million times, I'm sure. Hold me close and hold me fast, the magic spell you cast. This is La Vie en Rose. When you kiss me, heaven sighs, and though I close my eyes, I see La Vie en Rose. When you press me to your heart, I'm in a world apart, a world where roses bloom. And when you speak, angels sing from above. Everyday words seem to turn into love songs. Give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be La Vie en Rose. In other words, life will be rosy. And if we choose to see the good and to praise it, to really emphasize that, we realize that, there is something else going on here. There's a greater truth, a greater realization. There's a Zen saying, now that my house is burned down, I can see the sky better. There's a way of looking at it. But Alan Cohen wrote a book called A Deep Breath of Life, and he had a letter from a successful Los Angeles artist who said, during the recent fires, my house was leveled along with my entire collection of paintings. He said, and I was really shocked by the next sentence where he said, now I'm free. I'm packing to go to the island of Kauai where I will fulfill my lifelong dream of leading wilderness adventures. Sometimes we get stuck in what we were successful at even after we no longer want to be there. And so for him, this supposed disaster was a blessing in disguise. And we get those. We get these blessings in disguise more often than we think. If we open to it and if we see it. I loved reading the 46th Psalm. When I heard these children were singing the 46th Psalm as they went marching into the concentration camp, I decided to look it up. And it says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has wrought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. And even if you don't agree with the pronouns and the whole thing, but there is that feeling that there is this underlying presence, this underlying strength, this underlying impulsion of evolution that is moving through everything. It's interesting, I was talking to somebody, I went to a celebration Friday night for the first feast of Mary Magdalene. I don't know if you know that the Pope elevated her and finally acknowledged that Mary Magdalene was an apostle. She was never a prostitute. She was Jesus' favorite. We thought Jesus didn't play favorites, but apparently he kissed her a lot. It's in the Gospel of Philip. So the Pope finally said, okay, well, she's really an apostle, so instead of just a memorial on her day, she gets a feast. So we had a feast. So for the first time in 2,000 years, we celebrated a female apostle of Jesus, because Jesus did not discriminate. He was inclusive. When you say, be ye perfect, even as my Father in heaven is perfect, one of the translations in Aramaic for that word is inclusive. Be inclusive, even as your Father in heaven is inclusive. Include everybody, because we're not different in spirit. We're all one. We're all one. There is a quote by Ernest Holmes here, which I've been moving my talk around a bit. We're surrounded by an infinite possibility. It is goodness, life, law, and reason. In expressing itself through us, it becomes more fully conscious of its own being. Therefore, it wishes to express through us. As it passes into our being, it automatically becomes the law of our lives. It can pass into expression through us as we consciously allow it to do so. It can pass through us as we consciously allow it to do so. It will not come. Knock and the door shall be answered. We have to acquiesce to its presence in us. Therefore, we should have faith in it and its desires and its ability to do for us all that we shall ever need to have done. It will do for us all that we shall ever need to have done. And so our affirmation for this day is, I trust in the ultimate goodness of life. 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 And so it is.